My boyfriend told me I was too fat for his family, so I lost weight, left him, and married his brother. At the wedding, he cried. I just waved and said, "Thanks for the motivation." A woman I share a desk wall with sent me a photograph of a bus shelter in Greenville with a laughing emoji attached, and I looked at my own face for about 9 seconds before I understood what I was looking at. 2 panels, left and right.
A line of type across the bottom in a typeface I could have identified from 40 feet, because I have seen it on a mug in a kitchen in Rock Hill about 400 times. The Cadwell method, 51 lbs in 14 months. The photograph on the right is me on a Sunday morning in March, at the finish of a 10-kilometer run in a park, holding a paper cup, squinting, with my number still safety pinned on, and half of somebody's elbow in the frame. I posted it myself. It is public. I have no complaint about the right-hand panel. The photograph on the left is me at the Cadwell family Christmas in 2021, sitting down mid-sentence in a green dress with a plate on my knee. I did not take that photograph, and I have never seen it before in my life. I am an underwriter. Commercial lines, mostly small business packages, 11 years. That means my entire professional competence is a single habit, which is that when somebody hands me a claim, I do not read the claim. I read the policy, and then I read the file, and I look for the specific place where what somebody has told me stops being supported by what is written down. I have done that 5 days a week since I was 21, and I had never once, in 11 years, turned it on my own life. I want that understood because everything that happened next happened for one reason, and it is not that I am brave or clever. It is that somebody put my face on a commercial claim, and a commercial claim is the one thing on this earth I know exactly what to do with. Sterling Cadwell told me I was too fat for his family in a car park. Not a restaurant, not a fight, not an argument at the end of a long night. A car park, outside a rehearsal dinner for his cousin in the November, with the engine running and the wipers on intermittent. He said, "Look, Mom said something and I'd rather you heard it from me." And then he said it. He put it in his mother's mouth, which was accurate, and he delivered it in his own voice, which is the part he has never accepted. He said, "You know what she's like. It's the business. She sees everything through the business." I remember the wipers. I remember that they were on the setting where they go about every 4 seconds, and that I counted 11 of them before I said anything. What I said was, "Okay." Then we went in and ate a rehearsal dinner, and I sat next to a woman called Corliss who talked about a cruise. The Cadwells own the Cadwell method. 11 franchise studios across 3 states at the time this starts. It is a weight loss and supplement business. A program, a meal structure, a branded range of shakes, and a thing called a reset pack. And Rosalind Cadwell founded it in 1997 in a strip unit in Rock Hill and has run it since. I want to be fair to her, and the fairest thing I can say is this: she believes it. Rosalind Cadwell is 63 and she does not experience herself as cruel. She experiences herself as the last honest woman in an industry that lies to people, and she will tell you, she has told me at a dinner table twice, that everybody else is selling comfort and she is selling the truth, and that the truth is that it is hard and that most people will not do it. She has said unforgivable things to at least 4 members of her own family in my hearing, and every single one of them was delivered as a kindness. So, too fat for this family is not, in her head, an insult about me. It is a business observation. I was, at that point, dating the son who was being groomed to run the Eastern Studios, and I was a size 18, and there is no version of the Cadwell Method's marketing in which the heir's girlfriend is a size 18. I was not a person she disliked. I was an asset that did not photograph. I should say what those 2 years actually contained, because too fat for his family is one sentence and it was 2 years, and the sentence was not the unusual part. The unusual part was that it was a business. At an ordinary family's Christmas, a mother who thinks something about your body says something about your body. At the Cadwells, a mother who thinks something about your body has a mechanism. Rosalind weighed people, not as an insult, as hospitality. There is a set of scales in the utility room at Rock Hill, a proper column balance, and at family gatherings there is a running thing where people step on it before the meal. It is jovial. There is a leaderboard on the fridge. There has been since about 2009. I did it once, in my first month, because I was 29 and I wanted to be liked. She wrote the number on the fridge in front of 9 people and said, "Right, that's your baseline." Baseline. Then there was the ordering. Rosalind orders for the table at restaurants, and she has done since before I met any of them. And Sterling had told me in advance that it was a family joke and to just go with it. And for 2 years I went with it. Then there was the January thing, which is the one I still cannot really talk about. Every January, the whole family does a reset. 14 days, the shakes, the pack, together. And there is a photograph on day 1 and a photograph on day 15. And in 2021 and 2022, I was in both photographs. Those photographs exist. They are on that company's servers. I did not sign anything for them either, and they have never been used. And I have never been able to decide whether that is because somebody made a decision or because I was not thin enough in the day 15 one. And underneath all of it, constantly, for 2 years, was the framing that made it impossible to object to. None of it is about you. It is about the business. We are all in the business. The business is the family. You cannot fight that. If you say your mother is commenting on my body, the answer is that she comments on everybody's, including her own son's, including her own. And that is true. Rosalind Cadwell talks about her own body with
with a coldness that would frighten you. Nobody in that house was ever cruel to me specifically. Everybody in that house was living inside a product. 2 years. That is how long I was with Sterling, and I do not have a great deal to say about it. He is not a monster either. He is a man who repeats his mother at volume, and has never in his life had an opinion that did not originate about 4 feet to his left. I left in the following August, 9 months after the car park. I want to be extremely clear about the sequence, because the sequence is the only part of this that matters legally, and it is the part everybody gets wrong. I did not lose weight and then leave. I left in the August. And then, over the following 14 months, for reasons that had nothing to do with him, I lost 51 pounds. Those reasons were my father's stroke in the September, which put me in a rehabilitation gym 3 times a week with him for 8 months, and which is the single most physically active period of my adult life, a change of medication in the November, and mostly that I started running because a woman at work asked me to do a 5K with her, and I said yes because I did not want to go home. I was not enrolled in the Cadwell method. I have never been enrolled in the Cadwell method. I have never purchased a reset pack, attended a studio, downloaded the app, or consumed a single one of their products, and I can prove every one of those things because they can prove them, because they have a database. Emmett is 3 years younger than Sterling, and he left the company in 2021. That is not a small thing in that family. In the Cadwell house, leaving the business is a bereavement. Rosalind refers to it out loud as when Emmett stepped away, in the tone you would use about a diagnosis. He manages a farm supply depot outside Chester. He is very good at it. He has 41 people in a warehouse, and he goes to work at 6. We started seeing each other 3 years after I left Sterling, which is a gap I want on the record because a person could otherwise do arithmetic on it and get somewhere insulting. We got married in the April. 60 people. Sterling came. He was invited by his brother, and he came and he sat in the 3rd row. And at some point during the ceremony, he cried. And afterwards, on the lawn, I saw him, and I did the thing that I understand has become the headline of this entire story. I waved, and I said, "Thanks for the motivation." I want to be honest about that. It was not a strategic act. It was not a devastating line I had been saving. It was 11 words out of a woman with a glass of Prosecco at her own wedding who saw a man she had once sat next to in a car park. And it was, I have thought about this a great deal since, the pettiest thing I have ever done, and I enjoyed it enormously. And it cost me nothing at the time. It cost me a great deal later, because somebody at that wedding took a photograph of me on that lawn. I need to be accurate about the wedding, because the version of it in that one sentence is not what the day was. Rosalind came. That is the first thing people do not expect. Her younger son was marrying her older son's ex-girlfriend, and she sat in the 2nd row in a navy dress, and she was, for 4 hours, absolutely faultless. She hugged me. She said the dress was lovely. She spoke to my mother for 11 minutes about nothing, and my mother said afterwards that she was charming, and she is. That is the entire problem with her. At about 7 o'clock, she found me by the drinks table and said, "You've done very well, Bettina." And I said, "Thank you." She said, "No, I mean it. You've done very well." And she made a small gesture, up and down, with 2 fingers. That is what she meant. She was not talking about the marriage or the house or the 11 years underwriting. She was congratulating me on 51 pounds at my own wedding with a gesture. And I said, "Thank you again." And she squeezed my arm, and she went and sat down. I have thought about that 400 times since, and here is where I have landed. That was not an insult, and it was not a threat. That was a woman looking at a result. 11 months later, there was a bus shelter. The photograph on the lawn was taken by a cousin of Emmett's called Junius, who takes photographs at everything and always has. He posted 41 of them in an album 2 days later. I am in 9. In the one they used, I am mid-wave, half-turned, with a glass in my other hand, and you cannot see who I am waving at. And the light was doing the thing it does at 6 in the evening in April. It is objectively a very good photograph of a woman who looks well. They did not use that one in the end. It is not in the campaign, but it is the reason the campaign exists, because Rosalind Cadwell scrolled an album of her son's wedding in the April and saw 41 photographs deep, exactly what she had been looking for since 2019, and then went and found a better pair. And the better pair required the Christmas 2021 one, which nobody outside that family has ever seen, and which she had to go into her own photographs to get. That is the part I keep coming back to. Somebody sat down with the family albums. The campaign went live 11 months after the wedding. Asset CM 2024-07. Paid social across 3 states, 11 studio windows, and, because a franchisee in Greenville bought an out-of-home package as an add-on, approximately 14 bus shelters. Left panel, Christmas 2021, green dress, played on knee. Right panel, the 10K, March, paper cup, line of type, the Cadwell method, 51 LBS in 14 months, no name. That is the first thing everybody asks. There is no name on that asset anywhere, and Rosalind's counsel made a great deal of that later, and it does not help them nearly as much as they thought it would, for reasons I will get to. Here is what I did in the 11 days after that bus shelter photograph landed on my phone, and I did it in exactly the order I would do it for a client. Day 1. I did not ring anybody. I photographed the ad myself in Greenville from 3 distances, with the shelter's asset ID plate visible in 1 frame, time-stamped. Then I did the same with 2 studio windows in Rock Hill and Fort Mill. Day 2. I went looking for the release, because you cannot use a person's likeness in a commercial advertisement without one. That is not a subtle area of law. It is about the most basic thing there is. Somewhere in that company company, there had to be a model release with my signature on it, or there had to be nothing. There was nothing. Obviously, there was nothing. I had never signed anything for that company in my life, but there was nothing. Is not a fact you can assert. It is a fact you have to establish. And I established it the way you always establish a negative, which is by making somebody else assert the positive. Day 3. I sent a short, extremely polite email to the Cadwell Methods marketing inbox, in my maiden name, from a personal address, saying that I had seen the campaign, that I believed I was the individual depicted, and asking whether they could send me a copy of the release I had signed so I could check the usage terms. They replied in 4 hours. They said they would look into it and asked which studio I had attended. That is the whole case, right there. 4 hours in, from a marketing coordinator who did nothing wrong and was just answering an email. Which studio did you attend? Because it tells you that the person who assembled that asset did not know. It tells you there was no release. Because if there had been a release, it would have had a studio and a member number on it, and the answer would have been in the same file as the photograph. And it tells you the claim that 51 pounds in 14 months on a program was not built from a client record. I printed that email. It is Exhibit 3. Days 4 through 9 were the substantiation file, and this is where being an underwriter stopped being a personality trait and started being the entire outcome. Every franchise system in the country runs on a franchise agreement, and every franchise agreement of any competence has a clause requiring the franchisor to substantiate national advertising claims, because the franchisees are the ones who get sued when a claim is false. I did not have the agreement. But 3 of those 11 franchisees are corporate entities with public registered agents, and one of them, the Greenville one, Otho Renwick, who had bought the out-of-home package himself, had 4 years earlier been in a completely unrelated small claims matter over a lease, and the filing in that matter attached his franchise agreement as an exhibit. Public court record, $11 and a 40-minute drive, Section 9.4. The franchisor shall maintain substantiation for all outcome claims used in system-wide marketing materials and shall make such substantiation available to any franchisee upon request. Upon request. I did not have standing to request it. Otho Renwick did. I want to describe the phone call to Otho Renwick because it was the single most uncomfortable 90 minutes of the whole thing. He is 54. He put $480,000 of his own money into a Cadwell Method studio in 2019, and he works 6 days a week in it, and he genuinely, actually cares about the people who come in. I told him who I was. I told him whose face was in his own bus shelter and that I had never been a client, and I asked him, I did not tell him, I asked him, whether he would request the substantiation file under 9.4. He was extremely angry with me for about the first 40 minutes, and I do not blame him for 1 second of it. He thought I was after money. He said something about ambulance chasers. He said twice that he had built that business himself. And then, at about minute 50, he went quiet and said, "Ma'am, can I ask you something? Have you got before and afters of your own?" I said yes. I said I had 2 years of running data and a rehab gym log and my father's physical therapy schedule. He said, "No, I mean, do you look like the ad?" I said, "I am the ad." There was a pause, and then Otho Renwick said, "I've been asking corporate for testimonials for 2 years." He talked for another 20 minutes after that, and I mostly listened. He said he had asked for local before and afters 4 times. Every time he got sent national creative. He said he had a woman in his own studio, a school bus driver, who had done 58 pounds over 2 years and who had volunteered twice, unprompted, to be in something. And he had put her forward in 2022 and in 2023 and had been told both times that national handles creative. He said, "I never thought anything of it. You just think head office is head office." Then he said the thing that made me realize he had already got there and had been sitting on it for longer than I had. He said, "Can I ask you a question and you tell me the truth? In 2 years, I've had 11 people hit their goal. 11 out of about 400 through the door. Is that normal for the system?" And I said, "Mr. Renwick, I genuinely don't know. That's what I'm asking you to find out." There was a long silence on that phone. Then he said, "Yeah, all right, send me the clause number." I want to say something about the 19 days because they were harder than any part of what came after. Because I had just asked a 54-year-old man to make a formal contractual request of the woman who controls his livelihood on the basis of a phone call from a stranger, and then there was nothing to do for 19 days. I did not sleep well in any of them. I checked my phone with a frequency I am embarrassed about. On day 11, I nearly rang him to tell him to withdraw it. Emmett asked me on about day 14 what I would do if the file came back clean. I had not thought about it. That is the honest answer, and it is a bad look for an underwriter. I had constructed the whole thing on a hypothesis, and I had never once done the thing I do professionally 40 times a week, which is ask what the file looks like if I am wrong. I said, "Then they've got a bad sourcing process, and I've got a likeness claim worth about $11,000, and I've dragged a man into it for nothing." And Emmett said, "And Mom'd be right about you." He said it gently. He was not being cruel. He was asking me to look at the thing I had not looked at, because if that file had come back clean, then every single thing I had done for 11 days, the photographs, the email in my maiden name, the court record, the phone call, is the behavior of a woman who was told she was too fat at a rehearsal dinner, and who spent 4 years building a case about it. That version of me exists. She is entirely plausible. Rosalind Cadwell's counsel described her, in Charlotte, in November, in about 3 sentences, and if the file had gone the other way, she would have been the only version in the room. I have thought about her a lot since. house. The difference between the woman I was and the woman his mother was going to say I was is 140 pages that I did not write and could not have known were there. That is a much thinner margin than I am comfortable with. He filed the 9.4 request on a Thursday. It took them 19 days, which for a 2-clause request is an extremely long time, and what came back was 140 pages. 9 years of internal outcome data, cohorts by year, retention, attrition, and a weight column. Mean sustained loss at 12 months across 9 years, 4.1 pounds. 4.1. I read that number in my own kitchen on a Tuesday night, and I did not feel triumphant. I felt something much colder and much stranger, which was that I finally understood the car park. I went through all 140 pages twice over the following weekend, and I want to describe what is in them, because the 4.1 is the headline, and it is not the worst thing in that file. Page 61 is a retention table. Median membership duration across 9 years, 19 weeks, which means the mean outcome at 12 months is calculated on a population that has, by and large, already left, and the company knows that because there is a footnote, and the footnote is honest. Page 88 is a cohort comparison that somebody commissioned in 2019, and that is the reason all of this exists. They ran their own 12-month outcomes against a published control figure for people who received a single dietary consultation and nothing else. The Cadwell method beat it by 0.6 pounds. There is a handwritten note in the margin of that page, scanned in blue ink, in handwriting I recognized instantly because I have had birthday cards from it. It says, "Do not circulate." R. Page 94 is a marketing memo from the March of 2019, 4 months later, establishing a new sourcing policy for Outcome Creative. It does not say, "Stop using clients." It says that going forward, before and after assets should be selected on the basis of visual impact and asset availability rather than program documentation to reduce turnaround. That is a sentence a person wrote to avoid writing a different sentence, and I have read enough files to know one when I see it. And the last thing, which is not in the file and which I worked out from the file, is the arithmetic on Rosalind Cadwell's actual position. She has 11 studios, 400-odd staff across them, and something like 61 families whose entire household income comes out of a system that she discovered in 2019 does not do the thing. She had 2 options in March 2019. She took the one where nobody loses their house this year. I am not excusing it. I have spent 11 years reading files written by people who took the option where nobody loses their house this year, and it is always, always the beginning of something much worse. But I would be lying if I said I read page 88 and thought, monster. I read page 88 and thought about a 63-year-old woman sitting alone in an office in Rock Hill with a control figure in front of her, and I had to get up and walk around the kitchen, because here is what that file actually says. The Cadwell method does not work. Not in a fraudulent, nobody loses anything way. People do lose weight, some people lose a lot, the top decile is genuinely impressive, but the mean sustained outcome across 9 years and 11 studios is 4 pounds, which is inside the noise of doing nothing at all. And Rosalind Cadwell has known that for 9 years, because she commissioned the tracking herself. It is her data. She built it, which is why, since 2019, every single outcome asset the company has produced has been sourced from somewhere other than the program. I checked. Once I knew what I was looking for, I went back through 5 years of the company's own social output and found 9 before and after assets. And I identified the subjects of 4 of them, and not one of the 4 had ever been a client. 2 were stock. 1 was a former employee, and 1 was the girlfriend her son had brought to Christmas in 2021. She did not choose me out of spite. She chose me because in 28 years, I am the most genuine transformation the Cadwell method has ever been able to get its hands on, and I was standing in her living room in a green dress in 2021 and running a 10K in a public photograph in March, and she had both halves. The cruelest sentence anybody has ever said about my body was said by a woman who was, at that exact moment, looking at 9 years of data proving that the thing she has spent her life on does not do what she says it does. Too fat for this family. She was not describing me. She was describing her own results. Their counsel offered $4,000 and a mutual non-disparagement agreement in the June. I want to talk about that offer because it is the most revealing document in the whole file. $4,000 is not a settlement. $4,000 is an insult with a stamp on it, and I have been on the other side of enough of these to know exactly what it is. It is a number chosen to be small enough that instructing a lawyer costs more than accepting it. The non-disparagement was the actual ask. 2 pages, mutual, extremely broad, and it would have covered, I read it 4 times at a kitchen table with a highlighter, any statement regarding the company's methods, outcomes, or business practices. Not my photograph. My photograph is in 1 clause and it is a short one. They did not want to buy a likeness claim. They wanted to buy the 140 pages that Otho Renwick had already sent me. Sterling called me in the July. 11 months of nothing, and then a Tuesday evening, and I let it go to voicemail and then rang him back, which I have gone back and forth on. He did not apologize. I want to say that first because everybody assumes there was an apology somewhere in this, and there has never been one from anybody. He said, "Mom's not well over this." Then he said the thing he had actually rung to say, which was, take the deal, for Emmett, not for himself, not for his mother, not for the business. He rang his brother's wife and used his brother as the lever, which is the most Cadwell act available, and which he did without appearing to notice he was doing it. I said, "Does Emmett know you're calling me?" He said, "It'd finish him, being in the middle of it." And I said, "Sterling, he left in 2021. He's not in the middle of anything. You are." He hung up. I told Emmett that night within about 90 minutes, and my husband listened to all of it and then said the only thing he has ever said about his family in 3 years, which was, he's not wrong that it'd finish somebody, he's wrong about who. I declined the settlement in the August and filed 2 things. The first was with the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. That is the one everybody thinks is the important one, and it is not. The second was a complaint through the network's own franchise compliance office, which exists because franchise systems are contractually obliged to have one, and which almost nobody ever uses, and which is the single most dangerous mechanism available to anybody with a grievance against a franchisor. Because the AG can fine you, the franchisees can end you. The mediation was in Charlotte in the November, in a conference room on the 11th floor with a jug of water and a whiteboard somebody had not cleaned. I was not required to be there, and I asked to be. Rosalind Cadwell sat directly across the table from me and did not look at me once in 3 hours and 11 minutes. She was extremely composed. She had a folder in front of her that she never opened. Their counsel, Lysel Prentice, a genuinely good lawyer who I have no complaint about at all, made the argument he had, which was that the asset carried no name, that the right-hand image was publicly posted, and that the company's position was that this was an unfortunate error in sourcing by a junior contractor. He was still speaking when I asked whether the franchisees present had seen document CM sub 9Y. There were 4 of them in that room. Otho Renwick and 3 others who had come because Otho had rung them. Rosalind Cadwell put her hand flat on the folder she had not opened, and Lysel Prentice, who is a good lawyer and who had until that second been running an entirely competent defense of a likeness claim, said, "I'm sorry, which document is that?" He did not know it existed. I am certain of that, and it is the single most important fact about that room. You do not brief your own lawyer on 9 years of internal outcome data when you have hired him to argue about a photograph. She had given him a likeness problem, and he had prepared a likeness defense, and it was a good one, and it was about to become the least relevant thing in the building. He turned to his client and said quietly, "Rosalind?" And she said nothing at all. Prentice asked for a recess. He is entitled to, and he was right to, and I would have done the same. They took 25 minutes. I want to describe those 25 minutes, because they are the ones I actually remember. 4 franchisees and me, and a jug of water in a conference room on the 11th floor, and nobody quite knowing whether to talk to each other. Billy Faraday went and stood at the window. Otho Renwick sat down and got out his phone and did not look at it. And one of the other 2, a man from Winston-Salem whose name I will leave out because he has since had a bad year and does not need this, said to nobody in particular, "My wife's in that program." Nobody answered him. Then he said, "She's been in it for years." That is the thing that has stayed with me out of the whole of it. Not the number on page 4, not Rosalind's face, a man in a conference room in Charlotte at 11:30 in the morning, working out in real time in front of strangers what he had sold his own wife. When they came back in, Prentice said his client would be taking instructions and that they were adjourning. And Rosalind Cadwell got up and walked out ahead of him, and she was still holding the folder she had never opened. Billy Faraday said as she passed, "Rosalind," and she did not stop. I read the number out loud, that is all. I did not make a speech. I read page 4, line 11, and then I read the definition of the metric from page 2, so that nobody could suggest I had picked a bad column. Mean sustained loss at 12 months, 9-year cohort, all studios, 4.1 pounds. And then I sat there while 4 people who had put between $380,000 and $600,000 each into that brand did the arithmetic on 28 years of marketing in front of the woman who had sold it to them. Nobody shouted. That is the thing I remember most. It was completely silent for about 11 seconds, and then one of them, a woman called Billy Faraday, who runs the Asheville studio and who had driven 3 hours that morning, said very quietly, "Rosalind, is that photograph a client?" And Rosalind Cadwell said, "No." First word she had spoken in 3 hours. The Attorney General's office settled in the March. Assistant Attorney General Nadia Okereke, 12 years in consumer protection, handled it and was extremely clear with me from the first meeting that my likeness claim was not what her office cared about. What her office cared about was the substantiation, $310,000 in restitution to franchisees, an injunction on unsubstantiated outcome claims, and a requirement that every future before and after asset carry documented consent and a verifiable client record. I took nothing, not out of nobility. My own claim settled separately and quietly for a sum I am not permitted to discuss, and which was not $4,000. 4 studios closed. Otho Renwick's was one of them, which I did not want, and which I have not fully made peace with, and which he told me, in a car park in the June, at a Bojangles, was going to happen anyway, and had been going to happen since 2023. He said, "You didn't close it. You just told me why." Rosalind kept the other 7. She has rebranded. She does not use the word method anymore. She is a coach now, and there is a lot of language about journeys, and there are no numbers anywhere on any of it. She has never apologized to me, and I have never expected her to. She sent one thing in the following January to Emmett, not to me. A card with a single line in it saying she hoped the 2 of us were well. He showed it to me and asked what I wanted him to do, and I said right back, so he did. I have thought thought a lot about what I actually got. I did not get an apology, and I did not get a moment. The 4 seconds on that lawn with a glass of Prosecco is the only moment in this entire story, and it happened before any of the rest of it, and it was cheap, and I did not know then that it would end up in a bus shelter. What I got was $310,000 going to 11 people I mostly do not know, and an injunction and a database that now has to be true. That is a colder thing than the story people want. Nobody in that family ever had to look at me and say the words. Emmett asked me in the spring whether it had been worth it. We were in the truck, coming back from his depot, and he asked it carefully, the way he asks things. I said I did not know. Then I said the thing that was actually true, which is that for 2 years, every single time I passed a bus shelter, I had checked. And my husband said, "Do you still?" I said no. He said, "Well, there you go then."